Hi, I'm Ted from Everything Attachments, and we're down here today to show you how to be able to replace the replaceable tips on your ripper shanks. This job is not one of the funnest jobs in the world. I haven't done it in a long time, and when this was put on at the factory, I'm sure they've got a Pacific press that just simply presses these dimples in. This ripper shank has two spots in it that are concaved in, and so they put it in a press and they press this ripper shank on. And if you had a whole lot of them to do like a factory would, then you would make up a jig and you'd just press them on. But the only way that I've ever known to replace them and replace them right is with a acetylene and oxygen torch, which not everybody has. A propane torch is not going to get the metal hot enough to make it soft enough to be able to do what I'm going to do. So you're going to have a acetylene and oxygen torch. And I hadn't used one of these in a while, but I know how to use it. And this is not a fun job, but sometimes you have to do it. On a ripper shank, you know, it seems to me a lot of times that it would have been nice 20 years ago or 100 years ago to start making these with a bolt or something in them. But because they're always in the rocks and so forth, and that would wear off, you know, that's maybe not as good of an idea as it sounds like. When it's normally being used, all the force is always usually coming this way, and so it stays on just fine. Now, I just popped one off my box blade the other day because I was backing up and caught a stump and simply just pulled it off. They will pull, even when they're put on right, or I get them from the factory and they're fully crimped right. If you catch it under a stump or something and are backing up and you pick up on it, it simply is the opposite way it was meant to be used, and it will pop them off. If you do pop them off, you need to put a new one back on before you wear on this shank through the dirt, because the more you wear on this shank before you try to replace this tip, the less dimple you've got to be able to make that compression to keep it on like you want it to. So I could simply take a hammer and just beat this brand new tip off with no problem. But since I'm going to have a acetylene torch to put the new one back on, and I'm right here, I'm just going to cut it off like what you normally would do as you wore this tip down. Most of the time, before you get worn this all the way down with these good hardened tips, with these SuperTuf shanks that we're using, made in the USA, you probably have a way more likelihood of popping it off on something than you do wearing it off before you need to replace it. So I'm going to take this brand new tip, I'm going to cut it off like it was a worn out tip, and then I'm going to do my best. I hadn't done this in 15 years, but so you probably haven't either, so maybe between the two of us and not knowing exactly what I'm doing will give you a more realistic view of what you would do. So I'm going to turn on my acetylene and light it. I'm going to add some oxygen. I'm going to turn up my acetylene. And I'm going to adjust. And that's the way you want to end up with, is where when you have your oxygen fully on, that your blue is brought back to the edge of your torch. So I'm going to cut this. Everybody's out of the way, I think. I'm going to cut this off. All right, so that got the old tip off. I'm going to clean up my hole a little bit, make sure I don't have any slag. All right, so if you'll see, there's a dimple right there where it's compressed into the shank. And I'm going to take a new tip that doesn't have any dimples in it. Okay, so I'm just going to reposition this in the vise where it's angled up better, like it was to start with. These vices are old, like 70 years old, but they're the good old ones, and they're better than what you can buy nowadays. And if you don't have a vise, we have an anvil here, but if you don't have a vise and you've got a good solid area, all you need is a good solid area, but what you will need is a friend to simply hold this sideways. Actually, me and a friend and an anvil or any solid part could do this better with two people by far than me doing it in a vise. But we're going to do it this way. So we've gotten the ripper shank off. We've got it cleaned up a little bit with a brush, got rid of any of the slag that was from the torch. You can clearly see the dimple there. Make sure you get your tooth on right, because sometimes it looks like it ought to go on that way, but it'll wear this soft part of the metal off, and then it's going to fall off. This is much harder, and that's the side that's meant to be on the side going towards the ground. Make sure you got it bottomed out good. Then I'm going to heat it with a torch, and you don't need as much torch just to heat it with as you do to cut it off. So I'm just going to use a little bit of acetylene, adjust my oxygen. All right, so that's really a small flame, just good enough to heat this really red without cutting through it. So I'm going to heat just a round dot here. All right, and if you don't get it the first time, just reheat it a little bit. Once the glow goes out of it, you're wasting your time. It's always going to seem loose after you do the first one until you get the second side. So I guess I'll do it over here. So that's how you replace the tip on your ripper shank. You're simply crimping in two spots into the dimples. All of the pressure from the dirt will always keep it on there, and the only thing your dimples are doing are keeping it from falling off. So I hope that helps you be able to replace the tips on your shanks in the future. You can always order the factory shanks for our SuperTuf ripper shanks for everything attachments box blades directly from us on our website. Thank you.